been driving this thing to work and she's been shaking like Eddie Money. So we've got the death wobble pretty bad here, and it's progressively getting worse. It started about a year ago, hit a big bump in the road, and the front end started shaking, so we just slow down, pull over to the side, take a look underneath. Can't really find anything obvious to tell you what the problem is there. Continue driving it, and you don't have any more issues. So it's only going to really happen for you on the highway, theoretically, once the vehicle, if the front of the vehicle lifts off the road a little bit, loses contact. That's probably what's engaging the death wobble, or helping it out, we'll say. It's been getting progressively worse. This year it's happened about 3 or 4 times, and now every time you go over the railway tracks on the highway or something like that, it's going to happen. All you can really do is slow down, maybe pull off to the side if you have to, but slow down until the wobble stops and then carry on your way. We've got the front end lifted up here. We're going to get underneath there, and we're going to take a look at some of the causes for the death wobble here. That's the driver's side tie rod end, and it comes along and it connects right there. And then we've got this other bar where we have our tie rod end there on the passenger side, and that bar comes along. And there's where our steering stabilizer is on the back. You can see we're missing a nut. That's not good. Here's a better shot at that steering stabilizer. That's coming from the passenger side, and it's connecting to roughly the center of the linkage there. This is where it's getting bolted in here on the passenger, and that's where it bolts onto the rod right there. And that rod continues over, and then it goes over to our drag link, which is coming off of our gearbox, our power steering gearbox. Up in there you can see the power steering gearbox. This is our drag link, and that's where it's connected right there. Now if we grab this one here, this one's pretty loose, so that's going to be part of our problem there. I can't tell with that one. And I can't tell with this one over here on the passenger side, because I do believe it's like the pressure of the suspension or the weight of the vehicle that's on this thing. That's why we can't check that right now. We'd have to remove it and check, see how loose it is. Another thing to look at is the lower control arms here. So this is the front differential axle here, and this is the lower control arm, and you can see that it connects from the body there to the bottom of this axle. So you'll have in here our rubber bushings. Those are likely cracked and wore as well. This is a look at the driver's side lower control arm, connected from the body to the lower portion of the front axle. When we look in close, we see that the metal is cracked and rotted and damaged. Now that's going to be the metal that's holding that rubber bushing in there. So that's not good. That's going to need to be replaced as well. We can also look at the lower ball joint here and the upper ball joint right there. Those could be loose as well. So what we're looking at is suspension components, steering components, anything that could be wore out, damaged, or loose, and cause this front end to shake under a higher speed on the highway. You're not going to notice any of this stuff at low speeds, but when you're on the highway, that's where you're going to find it. We also have the upper control arm, so this is at the top of the axle there, and then it connects to the body over here as well. And there's going to be one of those on either side. This is the driver's side. Right there's the passenger side. And again, connected to the top of the axle up front there. The first thing you want to look at is your steering components, because those are the rods that are basically connecting your driver and passenger wheel together, and the death wobble is isolated to the wheels. And those wheels are like shaking, and that's what's causing the front end to shake, is because all our components are likely loose and we've got too much play, and then those wheels start shaking up in the front there, and that's what's causing the problem. So then we got to figure out what is it and why. The design of the Jeep here has 2 rods. There's this one rod that goes all the way across there, and then it connects into this other rod that goes to the steering up there. It's kind of like some kind of
scissor design, and then it's got a steering stabilizer in there. So this is what we're going to look at first, are these steering rods first. The reason that you're dealing with this most likely is in most vehicles they're going to have a removable tie rod end on either end of the vehicle, and in these cases what it is a tie rod end on one side and then a complete rod, and then you have a removable one on the other side. So odds are is people have changed the removable one because those parts are probably pretty easy to access and replace. And the rods, though, they likely get neglected and they don't get replaced, and so you should expect that the tie rod ends on the rods, the big long rods, are all wore out, and that's likely what's causing the problem. If we come in here, this is the tie rod end that's affixed to this rod, and the rod continues to go all the way down. People don't change this rod. They just change the other end. And so this thing here is about the life of the vehicle, and that's probably why it's all wore out and no good anymore. And the same thing is going to be on this rod as well. Again, you see we have our tie rod that's formed into the rod here that goes into there. So this has likely never been replaced and it's wore out. Now, if we take a look on these sides here, these are the removable ones. So you can see where it's threaded into our union here. So this tie rod end here can be removed and adjusted, and that's likely been replaced, but the long part hasn't. Again, we take a look at this one and you can see again, here's our removable tie rod end that goes into our coupler there. So this piece never gets changed. This one likely does. I think what happens is people replace these ends, but they don't replace the rod because the rod might not be easily acquired as a replacement part. So they're really only fixing half the job. So you'll have a tie rod end on there that's nice and tight. But if you think about it, these two rods here, that one, that long rod there, and the one in behind, those are likely original equipment. Therefore, you've got 20 plus years of the same tie rod end. Now when I get under here, I can move this one, and I imagine once we disconnect it, we're going to find that that's going to be really loose. When I tried to test the one on the passenger side here, I couldn't get it to move, but I think that's because we've got the pressure and weight of the vehicle on there, and we've got the connection from the steering stabilizer and then again to the drag link off of the power steering box. I again think though, once we remove all these parts, we're going to find out that all those connections are wore right out. So what's causing the death wobble? So this is primarily our problem here is going to be in our steering components. At least that's what I'm going to target. You could have other things too that are going to contribute to it, like you've got your sway bar here and you've got your sway bar link, and you might have some suspension, world suspension components in combination with your steering components. But I'm going to target the steering because it's the steering that keeps those wheels parallel. And when those pieces are wore out, that's what's going to create that looseness, that clearance. It's going to let things move more than they should. So what happens is when you're on the highway at a higher speed, and if you end up hitting a bump and getting some clearance off of the ground, that's where the death wobble is going to kick, is because it's lost contact with the ground, and now the velocity of the tire turning, because it's a 4x4, is likely, that's what kind of sets it off path now because of these worn parts. At least this is what I think causes it. And when we replace all these parts, we'll be tightening everything back up again, and we won't have that condition anymore.